Hey, welcome back to Friendly Advice. I'm so excited to be back on the podcast and on video this time. It has been a lot to manage on my own as being a mom of two boys and a wife, and just getting used to like stay at home life along with managing a business. So it took me a second to come back to podcasting, but it is my first love. And I really love being here to share all the things. So let's unpack the elephant in the room. What the hell happened to Fran for 2 years? All right. So today I'm just going to give you a bit of my story. It may be more of a rambling session, but I promise you, most episodes will be like very informative, very helpful to get you to the point in a business that might be to 6 figures or 7 figures, depending on what your desired dreams are. Or if you're just like, I just need a little extra change, ain't nothing wrong with that. And we'll talk about that. But today we'll talk about my story, why you should get to know me and hang out and stick around, and why I closed my business 2 years ago. All right. So number one, thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to this show. It is so interesting. Over the years that I've been gone, there is a crowd of 50 women who constantly say, Fran, will you ever come back? Will you give us financial advice again? Will you help us build businesses again? Will you just tell us all the things? I just miss hearing you. And that really warmed my heart. It's part of the reason I made sure podcasting was a part of this business model, no matter what I did. So let's start with my history and backstory, and then we'll talk about what I'm doing now and how I can support you in whatever your venture is in your brain and what you need support around. All right, so let's go back to the year. The year is 2017, and Fran is a young 20. Was I really young? Yes, I was a young 20. And I was not quite engaged, but me and Ron were serious at that point. We were thinking about marriage. It was always on our mind, or at least mine. And I knew we would get married soon. And I was like, wait, I got hella debt. I need to get rid of some of this before I force this man who has immaculate credit to join me in my chaos, because I did not have good credit. I think I might have been in the high 400s at that point. So a lot of what I decided to do in 2017 stemmed from I really need to be out of debt, because I don't want to start marriage in a situation where we're arguing over money, because I knew it was the number one reason people got divorced at the time in the US. So I was like, I don't want that for us. So let me do what I can to learn money management, and then we'll come together. So as I was learning money management, I was like, ooh, I need more money in order to make things happen. I got a job at a gym because I taught cheer and tumbling all throughout college. And then at this point I had a big girl job, but it was not paying big girl money. It was just taking up a lot of time. So I had this job that I was making $38K from a year. So I got a side hustle working at a gym. And then I also started my podcast called Becoming the Lender. And I talked all about how we were getting out of debt before we got married, and then how we were continuing to pay down debt once we got married. I think when we got married, it was $90K in debt outside of student loans. So we talked through the different things I did. So both of us side hustled really hard. Ron plays 4 instruments, and so he would play at different churches and different gigs and make more money. I would just use whatever random talents I had. So I had my podcast, I was working at the gym, and then I also learned from just having the podcast and talking to other financial gurus on the internet at the time about the virtual assistant world. And I was like, oh, cool. I pretty much can learn anything. So I was like, I'm game. I can be a virtual assistant. So I started my virtual assistant side hustle business to pay off my debt. And what do you know? The thing starts going crazy. I'm making more money being a virtual assistant than I was at my actual job. So I'm managing this podcast of my own, becoming the lender. And then I have clients who I'm helping as a virtual assistant, like just general virtual assistant work. So I could help people with social media. I was helping someone with random one-off projects. And I was so afraid of that lady, actually. Just random one-off projects. She would just send me an email and be like, can you do this in Oracle? And I'd be like, I don't even know what Oracle is. And I would like panic and try to do all this research. And I'd be like, can you give me more details? And she's like, as a virtual assistant, you should know. And I really hated that. But then I just kept like getting more virtual assistant work from things I started to learn from managing my business. So one of the things I had started to learn and figure out over time was things like Dubsado, project managers like ClickUp, Asana, Notion was coming into play, Monday.com, and all that. So I started learning all these things, and I was like, hey, I'm actually better at this side of it. I'm better at like managing the projects and putting all the tasks into work and giving it to someone else. So I became what's known as an OBM, an online business manager, and like started to like keep my virtual assistant clients, but I had like a VA who worked under me who would do the work for my virtual assistant clients. And then I took on like 3 or 4 OBM clients who were paying me like $45 to $50 an hour. And it was like work that felt like work again, like a 9 to 5, but it was so profitable. At that point, I had skyrocketed myself to 20K months. And so I decided to quit my job and just be an OBM. And as I was like going through it, I was like, okay, like I think OBM work is what I need. It's what I'm going to be good at. And I think it's the thing that will help me feel happier than I do at work. So I quit my job and I became an OBM, and I was just like, no, this still feels like my 9 to 5. Like you were also causing the chaos, and it wasn't my clients per se. Like nothing about them was bad. Like they were all lovely. I just needed more predictable work because my goal apparently has always been to work less and still make real money. And I don't mean less as in like I don't want to work hard. I mean less as in like once I found out I had ADHD, I just knew there are limited hours in every day that my brain can truly focus on working. So I needed to figure out how to actually be a CEO and not so much like a task rabbit, right? So I get a couple podcast clients randomly on the virtual assistant side, and I realize my team loves it. I'm really good at making process documents for them for podcasting because I had my own and I understood what our clients needed to keep them pushing and moving and producing episodes like weekly, bi-weekly. We had one that had 3 every week, right? So I get like at this point, I get my first 3 podcast clients and I'm like, oh, we're killing this. One of my OBM clients, she's just like, oh, I saw you're offering podcast services from your virtual assistants. Can I like hire y'all? And I was like, of course. So I get her, and then she loves the service of the podcasting, tells all her friends. And then all of a sudden I go from having just these 4 podcast management clients to 10 in a matter of 2 weeks, right? So we were doing that good at pumping out podcasts and being super consistent about how we edited them. And I still have my OBM clients and some random other virtual assistant clients. But I was realizing I love the nature of how we were moving and grooving with the podcast clients. So I said, okay, I am going to fire any client who I don't do podcasting with. And I made a plan, like I phased everyone out. The first phase had to be my OBM clients because they took up the most amount of my time, but they did bring in the most income. So it was like really scary. So I let them go one at a time over like a two month period. And I was just like, hey guys, I know you see me on Instagram talking about podcast and you see the direction I'm moving in. And they all understood. 3 of them stayed on because they were like, can y'all just take my podcast? Because I really trust you with anything you're going to do, Fran. So I take on their podcast. And now at this point, we're at like 12 or 13 podcasts. I don't know. And it's just me and one virtual assistant. I randomly DM a friend from high school. And it was such a like God moment. I DM her and I was like, hey, I don't know like where this is coming from, but God's telling me like you're looking for something different. I would love to have you like work with me. I know previously in the past, her and her husband had done video editing, and like they did my aunt's wedding. Like they're family friends. Like I already knew they were in the like production kind of world. They understood it. There was not a lot of training to do. So I said, I didn't know if you wanted to give it a try, but I would love to like bring you on to help with some of the video and audio editing. And she was like, I would be happy to do it. And she didn't even bat an eye. She was just like, okay, let's do it. My other virtual assistant, she was just kind of like someone who was newer to the virtual assistant world as well, but also like super young. And like I was teaching her skills as well. At that point, I was editing all 13 podcasts, like the audio, and if we have video by myself. And she was doing more of the admin work of like making sure we had the graphics ready, putting together the audiograms, reaching out to clients to let them know when their episodes were ready, reaching out and requesting assets, and like scheduling the podcast episodes on the podcast management platforms. But I was doing all the like actual editing. So this was the first time I was releasing the editing work off to someone else. And so I was like super nervous, but super excited because I knew she could do it. So I bring her on and she was like, this is a lot of editing. I was like, I know. I like have to stay up like all day long to get them all done. And because at that point we were like about to onboard like 2 or 3 more clients. She says, why don't we bring in DeWitt, my husband? And I was like, bet. So I hired DeWitt next, and it's 4 of us, like just really knocking it out, like getting podcasts done back to back. At this point, I think I was only in charge of editing like 6 podcasts, but Nika and DeWitt would do the others. And then we had our one VA who was just like a killer at scheduling and getting everything else ready. So we started pumping out these podcasts like crazy. And then the pandemic hits. And this is oddly one of the biggest blessings and curses that ever happened in my world. Like the curse was I was cut off from a lot of my family members, right? Because everyone was like siloed. But the blessing was everyone started a podcast out of nowhere. So people were like on wait lists to work with us because we just didn't have time. So I went ahead and I hired 2 more audio editors and then 1 video editor and a copywriter because I was like, we're not that great at show notes and we want to add on blogging. So I bring in all these other people and it goes so well. We go from managing 15 shows, just the 4 of us, to about 10 of us at the end of it when it was all said and done, managing 50 shows. And I was like, oh my God, we really are doing this. And then so in the midst of all of this, toward the end of 2020, so we've now been editing podcasts for like, it had been like a year and a half at that point. So toward the end of 2020, we find out I'm pregnant, and I like could not like make it my first trimester, my first pregnancy. I couldn't stay awake. I had a lot of complications going on. So I stepped back from the sales part, and honestly, it was good because we were growing so fast. Sometimes I thought it was recklessly fast, but I was always very intentional if we were going to add on clients that month about hiring on a new team member before we got new clients. So I was intentional and like slowly made sure that was working. But once I was pregnant, I was like, oh my God, we cannot keep growing like this. Like it's not going to work with this new baby. It wouldn't work in this new environment that I had in my home. And at this point, I'm only like 6 weeks pregnant, freaking out about it. But I tell my team like, hey guys, I can't even stay awake. And I stop editing altogether. Like I become like a non-editor, and I'm just like managing some of the process, doing some quality here and there. At that point, I think I was only editing like 2 podcasts anyway. So I gave everything away to my team, and all I was responsible for was making sure our bills were paid. If somebody was out, making sure we had somebody covering for them, doing QA on a couple of podcasts that I had like most knowledge on, like what the show was and what the flow was. But I was pretty much just sleep. For 6 weeks, they ran the show by themselves, and I had come to terms with somebody's going to leave. I was like, maybe all my clients will leave. We lost 2 clients in this time period, just 2. And the reason we lost them is because they were just very attached to me, and that's fine. And I knew I wanted my business to be about more than me. So it was perfectly fine that they left because they were attached to me and they could not get past like working with my OBM because they were like, oh, but you guys are such different personalities. And I'm like, yeah, Nika at this point was promoted to OBM. I was like, yeah, she's great. She is the reason like half of your episodes come out on time because she's so organized and she's like the muse to my ADHD. But they just couldn't get with it. Like people are like this, and that was fine. So we only lose 2 clients while I'm out. I come back in second trimester. I'm ready to go. And I was too ready to go. I start a podcast course. I start one-on-one coaching. Mind you, I just came out of hibernation. I launched a template shop that went really well. Like the template shop made like, I want to say like $850, and templates were only like $10. And then I also started working on launching a program. So I'm doing all these things and still not paying attention really to my podcast agency. Again, at this point, it's like 3 more months. We lose 1 client, and that's because her business closed and she just left on her own. And I was like, oh, wow. But I wasn't selling. Like I wasn't bringing in new clients. So at this point, we're at like 45 or so retainer-based clients who just aren't leaving and are attached to the whole agency I built. I'm not really marketing the agency side, but it's still working out. This goes on for another year. I have the baby, and after I have the baby, I like just sell my course because I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do this. So I sold my course. I sold the ideology of my one-on-one process and how I was managing one-on-one clients for podcast launching. And then I finally came to the tough decision of closing my business due to mental health reasons. After I had the first baby, about 4 months in, I realized I had postpartum depression. And so I just closed the doors and I was like, I can't manage all of this. And I don't know how else to move on, but we still need money. So I closed the door, get a 9-to-5 job, and go to therapy. I was deep in therapy for like a year and a half. And we figure out in therapy, I have PPD. And a lot of my response to closing my business after having a kid came from childhood trauma. So I grew up with a dad who owned his own businesses. And anytime the business was struggling, so was my household. And I could feel it as a little girl. Like, we would live in like large homes when his business was doing well. And then all of a sudden we would shrink down and maybe even live in a hotel for a week, right? So my fear of doing that to my kids sent me running back to a 9-to-5 because I thought it would be more secure, right? So I had to do a lot of work to come back to the entrepreneurial space. I had to really work on who I was, heal my inner child, come to terms with the fact that I have PPD and I probably would have it every time I had a baby. And I did. The second baby, I had it again. But understand like how to grow and move from that and not live there. So now that I've had 2 years worth of therapy and so much unlearning to do about like entrepreneurship and how to do it safely and protect our family, I felt like really ready to go. Like I've been feeling ready to come back for a year, but I was afraid. I was like, oh, I'm just jumping around. I'm just hopping around. Right. So I settled down, figured out what I wanted to do. And I was like, I want to teach people how to grow agencies because that was insane work we were doing over there, like crazy work. So I was like, I want to teach people how to do that. And I want to teach people how to make money on their own terms and however they need to, because I know this economy has become so unpredictable. And I can say everyone I know who does like virtual assistant work, hey, I haven't seen as big a hit as the rest of us. Like they still get hit here and there, but they still have ways of making money that don't include sometimes even the US economy. Some of my friends have clients who are in Canada or in Europe, and they're doing just fine. Like, it's a really good business model. And plus virtual assistants, a lot of times I have a client right now who I told, just market yourself to smaller businesses who can't afford to hire people for admin work right now. And that is a really hot market because people are like, I can't afford healthcare. I can't afford a couple other things. I just need someone to do like maybe like their newsletter, or if it's like for a church, um, updates on their website or small things like that, or graphics. And it's easy enough work that people can do in small pockets of time to make some extra money. And I'm like, I want to show people how to do this because I did it for so long and I just kind of like kept going. I didn't really tell people how I figured it out. Number one, I hired a coach to figure it out and she was fan-damn-tastic. And number two, I spent a lot of time looking at what was going on in the market when I decided on podcasts. I looked around and I said, listen, people keep picking up mics left and right. So I know really well how to pick a niche. I know how to help you pick where you belong and what you should do if you want to start as a virtual assistant and grow to an agency. And social media management will never die. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm offering one-to-one business coaching for people who want to become virtual assistants and start an agency, or people who have like a virtual assistant business and they're ready to grow to like an actual agency level where you get to like the 50 client level, which is crazy, or become more of like a boutique and offer services that aren't just low ticket where it's like $150 for like one episode, where you're able to say like, hey, we offer everything from A to Z for your podcast, and we can do that all for you for $2,500 a month. You can get there, and you don't need as many clients when you offer like a boutique service where it's like more white glove and it's not so much about volume and it's more about like what you offer them in the service. So that's what I'm doing. You can click the link below if you would like to apply for one-on-one coaching. Right now, I am being a mommy by day and a coach by nap. So if you would like to sign up soon, because I have limited spots because I only work on nap time, during nap time. And then I also work on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. So yes, there are evening options, but they're very limited. And I already have clients right now. It's slowly booking out. I am working on figuring out how to make like smaller groups. I never want like a huge group program. I would want like 5 to 8 people in one group just to make sure I can serve all of you. But I'm working on it. It will come out in the next couple of months, I promise. And I'm so excited to be back on the podcast. And thank y'all for waiting on me to return. And if you want to sign up, just go ahead and hit the link below. I'll see you on the next episode.